Hey, everybody, it's Wednesday night. It's 7 o'clock. Welcome to the Hang Up. I'm Matt Dillahunty. And yes, for those of you who are incredibly observant, I'm wearing exactly the same shirt that's in the thumbnail. It's like we planned it, except we didn't. I just grabbed his shirt and noticed it matched while I was sitting here. I hope you're all doing well. There's a lot of things that have been going on. I know Aron Ra was down here in Austin yesterday testifying at the Capitol. I was unfortunately unable to make it and get on the list for that. But there were actually two different bills that were being addressed at the Texas Capitol. And weirdly, the picture of me that's live is like a zoomed in, propped up picture of me, so it chops off the top of my head, which is really weird seeing it. Anyway, one of the bills was about the Ten Commandments bill requiring all public schools to display the Ten Commandments in every public school classroom in a font and size that was big enough to be read by the average person from a distance and all this stuff. Never mind the fact that it's evidently, it is clearly a violation of the First Amendment. And this has been settled for a while. And so it was strange to see Texas jumping to that. And you had, I think Dan Patrick was talking about how we needed to get the Ten Commandments and the Bible back into public school classrooms along with prayer. And one thing that we need to remind them is that it wasn't prayer that was removed from school. It is impossible to remove prayer from school. Every time a test hits a desk in a school, there's somebody praying. What was removed from the school was mandatory school-led prayer, essentially a requirement that everyone in the classroom be led in the same prayer at the beginning of the day, as if it were a Christian school. That's what was removed from schools. Additionally, there was a bill, and there's constantly several bills trying to once again target trans folks, make it illegal to transition, get to outlaw gender affirming care for minors, but then they extend it into the adult realm as well. But that's not what's really my hang up this week. And for this week, it's been really strange. I've been focusing a little bit on dealing with friends and family members from my Christian past. And there's a realization that, it's not like I had an epiphany this week. I've known about this. I've talked about it many times. But of those of us who are the broader atheist, secular, free-thinking community, many of whom are watching right now, a good chunk of them are former Christians or former believers of some stripe, but predominantly in the West and in my audience, it's going to be former Christians. And every one of us was raised a bit differently. The way Christianity played a role in our lives before we found a way to transition, deconvert, whatever you want to call it. Each of us, there were differences in how we were raised, what role religion played, how seriously we took it, how seriously our relatives and friends took it. I had friends growing up who they were the only Christian in their family, and I had others where everyone in the family was a believer. And so you might have been alone, or you might have been in a happy group. There might have been constant reinforcement around you, and that might have impacted, how difficult of a struggle it was for you. One of the things is that Christianity, along with other religions, have a number of defense mechanisms within them that exploit all of those potentials. If you are the lone wolf Christian, then you're up against, the devil and his armies in a spiritual warfare, and it's your duty to help bring the truth and the news of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ to all of your friends and your family. And so anything that's not quite going right feels like, hey, you're doing the right thing, and anything that's coming along at you is oppression from Satan. And similarly, if you are surrounded by a family of believers and you're going to church and you're active, you may not come into conflict with non-believers as much, and you may not feel even mildly oppressed or repressed with regard to your religion. If you have a good social network, like everybody in my family was a believer, so I didn't know what it was like to be mocked for believing, whereas I had other friends that didn't have that kind of support, and they knew what it was like to be mocked, and that gets them in the mindset that oh, as Christians, we are being oppressed. And the more oppressed we are, the more clearly it is that we're doing the right thing. When in reality, it could just be that you're a pretentious asshole trying to shove your religion down people's throat, and that's why you're getting some backlash. But because of that, because we all have different experiences while we're in, people believe for different reasons. People are going to give it up for different reasons, which is why none of us have been able to find a magic bullet argument or statement that is going to, kind of end religion for everyone or even the people closest to us. So tonight's guest is Brady Goodwin Jr. Be good in the label down below. He's a founding member under the name Fanatic of an influential Christian rap group, the Cross Movement, and he's the author of Let There Be Gaslight, Does the Bible Tell the Truth About Our Creation, Fall, and Redemption? So please join me in welcoming Brady to the show. I have tons of questions for you, sir. Thanks for agreeing to come on. How you doing?
Hey, I'm excellent, man, and thank you for having me. This is a pleasure and an honor.
My pleasure entirely. So before even getting into the Christian rap stuff, what was your upbringing like? How religious were you, your family? What kind of, denomination, and how did it impact your daily life?
Great question. So I grew up in the city of Philadelphia, going to church on the weekends, not really caring very much about the place I was going to, more caring about the people that I was meeting there. So my mother was taking us there. I think it was sort of her way to make sure that we didn't get too wild growing up in the inner city, kind of like just holding us in place. I responded to an altar call around age 12, not really knowing what I was responding to. I just saw God was offering something. I didn't want to be seen, not responding to whatever God was offering. So I responded. Didn't pay much attention in church, was there for the girls, there for my friends. I remember hearing a sermon around age maybe 11 or 12 where the pastor was making a statement about how God doesn't need to take from somebody else to bless you. But we were going through the conquest where they're taking other people's land. And I'm like, wait, isn't God taking from the Amalekites to bless Israel? But, I didn't think too much about it at the time. I just, said, okay, this is what we believe. Around age 15, so I was in the youth group. I was going to youth group every Friday, on the youth choir every Saturday, and then church every Sunday. But around age 15, I opened the Bible and read it for myself for the first time. And I just was introduced to the category of eternity and the God who supposedly, as I used to say, he outlasts everlasting, whatever that would mean. And I was hooked on this person I was reading about. And so even though I grew up in church, it meant nothing to me, though I liked the songs and I liked the culture for a limited amount of time.
Right.
But after age 15, it became very serious to me. I believe I was dealing with a person, a divine person. And that was about maybe a year before I started rapping about it. So the rap came after a year of just, I'd stopped wilding out in the streets, stopped cursing, stopped failing school, stopped sleeping with girls, because I was trying to be the best Christian I could be. And after about a year of that, I met some other people who were doing Christian rap, and I saw them and thought just that blend of faith and culture was something I wanted to do, and that took it on a whole nother trajectory. So that was my upbringing. But then after, like I said, I got a hold of the gospel myself. That was age 15, and I spent the next 30 years going down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, there's some similarities between the two of us. I was never a Christian rapper, although at one point I probably would have liked to have been, because I'm super old school. So it's like, Run DMC, Curtis Blow, and all those guys, and had my own breakdance crew, which is stereotypical of every white kid in St. Louis in like 84, 85.
Okay.
But I walked down the aisle at an altar call to Revival. It runs age 5, so I got there a little ahead of you. But church was just what we did, and actually, I went more than my folks did. That's where my friends were. That's where the people who hung
Okay.
out with. And so for the longest time, it wasn't that I was that serious about church, but like you were saying, oh, I went there because that's where the girls were, or that's where my friends were.
Mm.
And so it was like that. And it was probably a little younger than 15 as well, where I started realizing what it was all about. And our church in particular would focus on special teen events where essentially you are having impure thoughts and you are not living the life that Christ wants you to live, and your walk with the Lord is not good enough, and you have fallen away, and you
I
come
remember
in and
those.
you pay lip service to this every Sunday, but we know you're out there doing this. And they just hammer the teenagers with their hormones
Yeah.
going like crazy.
Yeah.
And myself and every kid in our youth group were rededicating our life to Christ every
Rededicating, yeah.
2-3 weeks.
Yeah.
So how long from after you kind of got serious about it, how long before cracks started to form?
Decades. I was in the 12th grade. Maybe I was in the 11th grade, actually. End of my 11th grade year, when I got on fire for Christ, I went immediately back into the high school, into the lunchroom, and I found myself doing the work of an evangelist and an apologist in 11th grade. Before I even knew what good arguments were, I remember this one girl named Tanisha. I forget her last name, but we used to have knock 'em down, drag 'em out arguments in the lunchroom because she was an atheist, and I was not going to let her get away with her atheism. So I was strong-minded, strong-willed, strong faith immediately. And then once I got a hold of, I had a friend of mine was in Bible college. He came home with commentaries and all that. So we start reading and seeing like, hey, there's more than just this one view. Which view do you hold to? I hold to the third view. And me too. I think that's more consistent. And so we were strengthening our faith and strengthening each other's faith for decades. Cracks didn't begin to form. I mean, that was the early mid-90s. I went to Bible college in 2003, graduated 2009. In Bible college, I shifted from believing the Bible was inerrant to believing it was infallible. And that still didn't crack my faith. So it wasn't up until 2014, so 30 plus years, 35 years, that I finally began to say something's wrong here. So that's a long time.
Yeah. Now, another big difference between us, when I was in high school, I don't remember, like my friends were in my church, but I also went to a massive high school. Like there were like 970 kids in my graduating class. And so, you didn't know everybody, you didn't interact with everybody. And it wasn't even so much that I remember there being, cliques. Like you hear about, oh, here were the jocks and here were the nerds and here was, this. And I kind of ran with anybody and everybody in small doses. And I don't remember spending any time actually witnessing or preaching or arguing with my classmates. We would go to summer camp, we would do all of this at church, and then on Monday night visitation, like if you came and filled out your visitor slip on Sunday, we would go out in groups to visit those people. And occasionally I would run into somebody who had visited who wasn't a believer. And I don't think I knew what to do. I don't think I knew enough about what was going on to really do anything other than, hey, we really enjoyed having you at church. We'd love to have you back next week. Is there anything that, we can do for you? Is it all right if we pray with you? Is it all right if we pray for you? Just putting the best face on it that you could, because, there was no discussion about deeper theology. There was no discussion about the reliability of the Bible. There was no discussion about various other denominations or, premillennial and postmillennial stuff. We believed what we believed, and we didn't bother investigating what anybody else believed or why. And so it wasn't until I was an adult and in the Navy that I actually started engaging in discussions with atheist friends of mine or people who were part of another religion. And so I was in a completely different environment at that time. Now, do you remember, and you feel free to, nope, don't remember that because I don't. Do you remember anything specific about like the first moment where you were like, hang on, maybe what I believe isn't true? Was there anything that you recall that was like an aha moment or a question mark moment, or was it kind of like an accumulation of things that you can't really identify?
The accumulation came after the first crack. It wasn't like it was building up and building up. The first crack came, and in an instant, I felt the floor open up, and I was like, my orientation was off from that moment on. Then the accumulation began. But that crack, it came in seminary. There were things that would have cracked it, but I mean, my defense was so up, my apologetic, my faith was so strong. There are things that probably should have cracked it, but all it did was at first, it invited me more into the mystery of God is deeper than I thought. But once the crack came, those things that were deep mysteries, it was almost like, no, that's not a mystery. That's proof of the fallacy here. But the crack was, I read a book from Peter Enns, who was a former professor at the seminary. And he was arguing as if evolution was true. And because evolution was true, Paul had to be wrong about what he said about Adam. Through one man, sin comes into the world, and through sin, death. Death spreads to all men.
Yeah.
And then he went as far as to say, but because we still see that sin and death is a reality, even though Paul was wrong about Adam, he's right about Jesus. And I remember just sitting there saying, like, you're not, first of all, this was back in the mid 2010s. So first of all, evolution's not true. And I had a whole defense in my mind for that, unscientific as it was. But then I said, if it is true, you're not going to get me to still, if there's a naturalistic explanation for human origins, you're not going to get me to accept a supernatural explanation for what we're calling sin and death. It's a string here. That's why the subtitle to my book is, Does the Bible Tell the Truth About Creation, Fall, and Redemption? Because if you take away creation and fall, what is there? What do you need redemption for? And so that was the lead up to the moment that cracked it. I wrote a whole paper debating and refuting Peter Enns. And then I bragged about it to another professor of mine who was a current professor at the school, Hebrews language professor. Mm-hmm. And I tore Peter Enns down, and I was waiting for him to kind of pat me on the back like, attaboy. And his response was, well, Pete's a good guy and a dear friend. We just had dinner last night. I just got finished bad-mouthing this dude and his theology. But then he said, and here are the books that influenced Pete to think the way he thinks. When you get time, you should check him out.
Yeah.
And I took note of that, like, okay, maybe I will. But then later that night, I was laying in bed and I said, wait, he didn't say Peter Enns was wrong. He was supposed to tell me this guy was wrong and tell me good job for refuting him.
Yeah.
And that just messed with me. That it put a bug in my ear. And from that moment on, I remember sitting in my classes saying, if something else was true, what would I find in the Bible? If there was if evolution was true, then Genesis can't be true, at least not in the way that I thought. And right. So I would start to find inconsistencies and contradictions. And then when I look with that lens, I'm like, oh, snap, that's all I see here. And from that moment on, I could not unsee what I had seen. Yeah, I still didn't think evolution was true. I was seeing too much to unsee it.
Yeah, that is an incredibly powerful line of reasoning where if evolution is true, then Paul's statement about sin coming into the world through Adam clearly can't be, because that requires one ancestor that we're all connected to. It's also what frustrates me about evolutionary biologists who refer to mitochondrial Eve, because I wish they wouldn't have called this abstract. There is somewhere in the past one woman that all of us are related to, But who that is changes over time as the lineage dies out. And yet, so they call her Eve, and all of a sudden, the first stage one is Christians who don't believe evolution, like the position you were in. And so clearly, Peter's trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist because evolution's not real. And then you go and you find out, hang on a minute, Peter was right about evolution. And since that's real, do I need to create this apologetic to show how this is still right? Or is it okay to throw that out as well? Is it okay to say, hey, maybe sin didn't come into the world through a physical, individual, lone Adam that is our progenitor, but through a metaphoric Adam, we as a society just sin. And not like the concept of sin makes all that much sense, but it's at least makes more sense than a Trinity.
Right.
But if you are sitting there looking at this, hey, how can I make sense of the Bible knowing this is the case? And I remember growing up where I can't tell you what my parents did or didn't believe about evolution. I can tell you that I accepted the science and just never spent any time trying to reconcile it with Genesis.
Wow.
We were biblical literalists, but it's like my brain has the ability to go, nope, block that out. Don't spend any time on that. It's like I recognized a conflict. I recognized a bunch of conflicts growing up. And on occasion I would go to, my uncle or to family members or to a preacher and ask questions, and whatever answer they'd give, because I was basically taught to, these are the authorities. You just accept what they say. They know more than you, and God knows more than them. So when somebody tells you, well, you can't have morality without God, or, you don't necessarily know that science understands evolution correctly. But what we do know is that no matter how it happened, God happened.
God did it. Right. Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier that your mom kind of sent you to church or took you to church, kind of like a babysitting thing. I did a video once where I talked about how many parents just are at a loss. I don't know what to do with my kid. I don't know. And I'm terrified that I'm going to screw it up. So let's just go to church so we're as normal and, safeguarded as possible. When you finally found your way out, how did your family members deal with that? Were they still predominantly religious?
So yes, everyone on my mother's side, all of her sisters except one, are very spiritual, they would say. Not just spiritual, but they have a relationship with God through Jesus Christ. Many of them are more Pentecostal than I kind of grew out of that. But I didn't know what to expect, because of my generation. I was the one that they were probably thinking, we're going to hand the spiritual baton to him. When it came time for someone in my generation to represent, I was the one praying. I was the one, they were all supportive of my music, and the ministry that I was in for 30 years. And so I wasn't sure what was going to happen. And about 3 days before I put out my deconversion video, we have a family group text. I text the family, said, hey guys, you might hear, but I want you guys to hear it from me first. I'm no longer a Christian. And I was expecting something nuclear to happen in the family chat. But all I got was, I love you. I'm praying for you. We need to talk. And I had, one aunt take me out to breakfast, and another asked me to come by. But no, there was no, it's almost like if they look at what I had done for the last 3 decades of my life and who I was, and they know the amount of time that I put into studying and I want to believe what they were thinking is, he must have his reasons. After all that, for him to deconvert, he must have his reasons. I've really only heard from my mother, who was just saddened, and saddened because she doesn't know what's going to happen to her son in eternity. But surprisingly, she actually told me she thought about the things I was saying about why I don't believe the Bible anymore. I don't think she thought about it for more than a few weeks. She seems to be back into her groove. That was over a year ago. So My family has been actually very, I don't want to say supportive, but just understanding or silent. Yeah.
It's in your case, in my case, I went in the Navy when I was 18 because I was terrified that my family was convinced that God wanted me to be a preacher.
Hmm.
And I did not want to be. I was terrified of public speaking. Something I think in the back of my head knew you believe this, but you don't know enough and you aren't
Hmm.
remotely ready to seriously defend this. I always had um, what my mom would refer to as spiritual wisdom and insight. And, when we'd review passages in the Bible, I'd have a good understanding. And I think that's why my mom was convinced that I was going to be a preacher. She says
Hmm.
God told her, but obviously I don't believe that God has ever told her anything. And God has also told her a great many other things, which are absolutely bullshit and or it definitely did not come true. Evidently God was going to give me and my ex-wife a miracle baby that was going to bring us back to Jesus. And of course now,
Wow.
while Beth is still my friend, we're still good friends and I talk to her, we're not together and we ain't never having a baby. So I don't know how God got that wrong so impressively, but he did. When
What
you,
parent,
because you
what
didn't face that
Christian
back.
parent doesn't have, I'm sorry, I'm thinking, what Christian
Oh, go
parent
ahead.
doesn't have this mindset that God's got a calling on their child's life?
Yes.
Like, that's not a unique thing for a Christian parent to
No, it was
experience.
so common, and it was common in our youth group. As a matter of fact, my best friend at the time, hi Brent, he went on to study and become a youth pastor, and then married one of the girls in his youth group, um, and proceeded to kind of stop doing that. Then eventually they got divorced and he became a Catholic. And he and I had a
Hmm.
conversation and he's like, when he found out I was an atheist, he's like, I don't understand how, you and I grew up at the same church. We were taught the same things. I don't understand how you can be an atheist. And I was like, I know what you mean, Brent, because you and I went to the same church. We were taught the same things. I don't understand how you can be a Catholic. And he's like, oh, I like to drink and they let me drink. And I'm like, okay, now I know the answer. One of the two of us took this shit seriously and the other one wanted to drink.
Wow.
But I love him to
Yeah.
pieces. I haven't talked to him in a long time.
Hmm.
And it's one of those things where I don't think that our disagreement has caused much of a problem, between us.
Hmm.
Like my brother and I don't agree necessarily on all the aspects of my atheism or anything else. And yet there's nothing that's ever going to
Hmm.
separate us. He's my favorite person. I
Yeah.
talk about him all the time. It probably pisses some people off how much I end
Hmm.
up talking about him. But when you look back on that time, how do you
Hmm.
view yourself? Are you
Hmm.
angry? Are you
Wow.
frustrated? Are you disappointed? Are you embarrassed? Or are you just, that's the way it was. And
Hmm.
I was sincerely doing the best.
Yeah. 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 You know what, Matt? I've done probably about 6 or 7 of these interviews where I'm telling bits of my story. No one's ever asked me that question. Uh, I probably have a mixture of emotions. Sometimes I feel sorry for myself. And I think I have my version of what others have. I have my mountaintop moments as a Christian. The fact that I was able to be a successful musical artist / missionary and travel the world, like people that come from where I come from, you're not going to London and Brazil and Bermudas and doing concerts all over the place like that. The impact that I was able to have started an entire counterculture. There's a part of me that is a little bit proud. I'm like, wow, look at, if I was doing something else with my life, I have no idea what would have happened to me. Most of the friends that I had, you know, kids by 6 different women, in jail, dead. Look at me. You know what I mean? And so part of me is proud when I look back at what I was able to accomplish. Then there's parts of my life that I look back and I'm a little embarrassed. I'm like, I can't believe I believed that. I said those things. I preached those things. I was willing to die, put my life in danger for this message. I listen to my old music and I'm torn because I'm like, man, that's so artistic. I love what I did lyrically. Then I think about what I'm saying and I'm just like, I could deconstruct this entire song line by line.
That was
So I don't
actually
know.
one of the follow-up. That was one of the follow-up questions
Okay.
because so I love one of my favorite Christian rock bands of all time is Petra, and their
Mm,
early acoustic music, Out of This World and other stuff like that, was huge for me. And musically, I think those guys were incredibly brilliant and just
mm,
brilliant songwriters, brilliant performers. I think their music stands up against anybody outside of
mm,
Christian rock, but I can't listen to it with the same enjoyment because of the lyrics. Like, I can't even appreciate it in the same way I might appreciate Amazing Grace, because Amazing Grace has this life outside of the church as well. It's
yeah.
kind of become
Hmm.
ceremonial. It still annoys the crap out of me, but not as much as, Onward Christian Soldiers and things like that.
Hmm.
And so one of the reasons why I asked how you view yourself is because I'm curious about how you view other people. Many, many people would ask me, hey, are you angry with your parents and your pastors for lying to you? And my answer has always been no, they weren't lying to me. They were wrong,
Right.
but they were
Right.
sincerely doing the best with their understanding. And so I'm not angry with them at all. I'm sad that they haven't also found their way out of this, but I'm not angry with them. They're like, well, are you angry with yourself? No,
Hmm.
because I was indoctrinated to this stuff I walked down the aisle at the age of 5. I mean,
Hmm.
who does that?
Hmm.
This was what I was steeped in from, well, I was going to say birth, but pretty much before birth. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure I was hearing the hymns and everything
Yeah.
else.
Hmm.
And, my entire family was involved in it. So no, I'm not angry with my old self. And yet there are people who are like, oh, Matt's just angry. Matt's angry all the time. Matt's angry. What I find myself angry
Hmm.
with is that I keep waking up in a world where not only do the majority of people
Hmm.
believe something that is patently absurd, that has not met its burden
Hmm.
of proof, but the majority of those, when you point this out, um, don't seem to be able or willing to grasp it. And so my frustration is with not individuals or it's religions, Christianity in particular, but religions in general, the protective defense mechanisms that they build in minds
Hmm.
as walls to prevent you from, to make their tenets appear unassailable when they're patently
Yeah.
ridiculous. That's where the
Yeah.
anger comes from. And so
Yep.
when you look back on your family and friends and people who are still believers in your life, do you view them with compassion or pity or frustration? How many conversations do you and your mom ever get into it? Because me and my mom did, and then we stopped.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. With family, I don't have very many conversations. Um, Me and my mother, we talk about these things maybe once every 3 months. And it's me just kind of just trying to see if she's willing to think a little bit more. But she still goes to the church that, I introduced her to back about 12 years ago. Um, yeah, we don't really talk because I feel like, so I have people in my life right now who call me and say, hey, I got questions and I think it might be where you are. And I don't reach out to anybody first because I don't want to seem like I'm out to just deconvert people. If they see my number
Right.
come up, I don't want them thinking, oh, he's chasing me down. So people call me, they reach out to me and I'm always available. Um, but then I think because I'm that way, there are people who just won't bring it up because they know I kind of know what I'm talking about. So it's not like we can get into it if you want, but this is probably not going to go entirely too well if at the end of the day, all you're going to tell me is you got to have faith. We can talk for 3 hours about all these issues and you're going to boil it back down to faith. So there are people who, if they are contrary to where I am, they're probably just not going to bring it up. But then I have a few who are willing to, have those interchanges with me, but only a few. So At first, there was some vitriol. I used to get texts from friends at 2:00 in the morning telling me I was going to hell if I didn't repent. And these are friends, people I've
Yeah,
done ministry with. You know, but that's kind of subsided because I've been very vocal on Facebook, so people kind of know you ain't got to poke too hard to find out where I stand on issues.
sure.
Yeah. So.
I tell you what, I got more questions, but
Yep.
it's a call-in show, and we got callers waiting. And in particular, there's a theist who's already been waiting for like 40 minutes. So let's start off here. I'm going to get to the call in just a second. As a reminder, there are lines open, and theists will always have priority on my show, whether we're talking about religion or not. And tonight, of course, we are. The number's at the bottom of the screen, and just I will try to exercise patience. If callers will try to exercise patience, there will be a delay and I may have to mute people. But we have caller Charles from New York, pronouns he, him. You're on the hang up on the line. Welcome, sir.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Good, man.
Going pretty well.
Good. So I'm just going to get right into it. Matt Dillahunty, I've always been told by people to talk to you because basically growing up as a staunch theist, a lot of my atheist friends would tell me they would always cite you when I try to get into an argument with them. They'd always be like, "Oh yeah, call into Matt Dillahunty, call Matt Dillahunty." So never really happened. You're not on the ACA anymore, so
Yeah. Hello.
yeah, I'm still good. That delay, holy shit, that delay is crazy, man. Holy shit.
I don't think the delay's as long as you think it is, but go ahead.
All right, so I believe that atheism in and of itself is a substance belief because it is a rejection of an ideology, and a rejection of an ideology in and of itself is a belief.
No, it can be. So if you have, so atheism takes two different forms. You could call it soft atheism, hard atheism, weak atheism, strong atheism. One of them is the state of not accepting theistic propositions. And that'd be the soft or weak one. I don't accept that. Just like I'm not convinced that Bigfoot is real, or I'm not convinced that there's a Loch Ness monster. The alternate version of atheism, or the stronger or harder version of atheism, is one where you assert that I am convinced, in fact, that gods don't exist, or I am convinced, in fact, that the Loch Ness monster doesn't exist. So that there's two different atheisms. One of them is a positive belief, and the other one isn't.
Okay, so what's agnostic then?
Agnostic.
That's not middle ground?
No, there's no middle ground between I believe and I do not believe. Those are two logically diverse prongs. So theism and atheism address belief, what you're convinced of. Gnosticism and agnosticism address knowledge. Knowledge is a subset of belief, and so you could be an agnostic theist, where you believe there's a God, but you're not claiming to know there's a God. And so if somebody says, are you convinced that there's a God? That's about belief. And generally speaking, even though we use justified true belief as a definition of knowledge, by and large, colloquially, when people say I know something, all they're saying most of the time is that I really, 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 really believe it. I believe something so strongly. So knowledge ends up being an expression of confidence, colloquially, and in epistemology, it is the result of an apparent justification. So in much the same way that if the claim is Matt killed someone, you are either convinced that Matt killed someone or you are not convinced that Matt killed someone. There is no middle ground and no other option. Those are the only two options.
Well, I mean, you treat religion like a virus, basically. Like the way you talk about it, I mean, how can there not be middle ground there?
Charles, I just went through an epistemologically sound and clear explanation of accepting or not accepting a proposition. And instead of saying, oh, that clears it up or that makes sense, instead you went on to an accusation that I treat religion like a virus and how can there not be a middle ground? So are we actually going to have a discussion about sound epistemology, or are you just going to ignore what I say and find a way to misrepresent what my position is?
I don't really think it's a misrepresentation. I mean, listen to how you talk about it. Listen to the way you're detailing everything in the words together. You hate religion. You hate the fact that there's a God.
What did I
The
say?
fact that there's a God.
What did I say? What did I say just now in describing belief and acceptance and rejection that in any way treats religion like a virus?
Because your negativity towards it, like
no, sir.
You hate that
there was no
You hate that
negativity. I was describing just now a simple philosophical position that has nothing to do, by the way, with gods or religions. That's what I just did. And your response to that was to ignore everything that I said of substance and instead pretend that attacking me personally doesn't matter. Let's assume for a second that I despise religion with every fiber of my being. How is that relevant to what I just discussed with regard to belief and knowledge? Yeah, let's get a caller in who, while not a theist, has a statement or question that might be good for you to address. Okay. Roger in Colorado, pronouns are he, him. Welcome to the Hang Up on the Line.
Hello.
What's up,
Roger? How you doing?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, how are you, gentlemen?
All's well.
Doing all right.
Good. Yeah, so I grew up in the Assembly of God Church, which is just an offset or an offsect of the Southern Baptists. I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous. The upshot is I was given a deep fear of Armageddon and especially tribulation from a very young age. Around the age of 13, I realized that I no longer believed, at least not to the extent that I was supposed to. And so I fell into the terror, if you will. And I basically gave up on my life at that point because I knew it was going to be Armageddon and tribulations at that point. I'm now 61. In between, I dabbled in drugs, drank alcohol. I have not had a career due to this, and I'm dealing with a lot of deep-seated anger and et cetera. So anyway, that's kind of just the upshot. I was hoping to get some perspective from you gentlemen, especially Brady, regarding that indoctrination and how it harms children.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I just did a show on my podcast the other day where a guy was talking about the way his father raised him and reading him, stories about Abraham sacrificing his son Isaac, or being willing to sacrifice his son. Somebody in the questions asked him, does he think the way he was raised in the religious household, does he think it counts as child abuse? And he started to say no. But the more he talked, he told the story about one day asking his father, Dad, he said he was around, I think 10 or so, Dad, if God told you to, would you sacrifice me? And his father leveled with him and said, if God said I had to. And he said the response, he stayed up, for nights on end, holding his eyes open every night just to try to see if his dad was sneaking into his room to sacrifice him. So when I hear you talk about just the potential lingering effects of being raised in a religious household, especially if you're a fundamentalist, if you're a literalist, and you're expecting it all to come to pass, the images that puts into a child's mind. I can relate to some of that. Once I deconstructed, I was able to put it all in the same category of myth, the same category of, oh, this was an ancient people trying to comfort themselves through hard times. They painted a picture of the end that looked better for them than the one that they were currently looking at. Once I understood that, I was able to, put close Pandora's box and put all the junk back in. But yeah, I certainly agree that there can be trauma. But then there are others who've deconstructed, and like I said, they were able to, like me, seal that part of the mind off, lock that stuff up, behind a vault, and not open that door again, because they know that's where I put Lord of the Rings when that movie's over. That's where I put the Avengers when that movie's over. They put it in the fiction file cabinet where it belongs.
Excellent. I appreciate your Pandora's box analogy. That's very helpful. In contrast to Matt, I am infinitely angry at my parents. I just can't seem to get over it. They are both deceased. They've both been deceased for going on 2 decades now. And I just find myself shaking my fist at them and God, which is ridiculous. I know there is no God. So I don't know. I know these are all counseling issues, but I just hope to get some perspective from you gentlemen, and I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, and by the way, I tend to always recommend recoveringfromreligion.org and the Secular Therapy Project, both of which do stellar work in helping have conversations that maybe we're not always going to have time for in the shows or anything else. But it's what the thing you're talking about, Roger, is something that anybody who spent any time dealing with religion is going to have to face in one way or another. And I think one of the stronger things, or the stronger views that helped me out, was as soon as I realized I wasn't alone. And it's something that many of us have been trying to do, trying to remind people of, because I've been doing this for 19 years. 19 years last month. And I keep hearing from people on a regular basis, oh, I'm the only atheist in my area. No, you're not. Unless you're the only person in your area, you're probably not the only atheist in your area. It's just you don't necessarily know of anybody. And so it's like, well, there's no groups in my area. Well, there may not be, but quite often there is, and people just don't know about it. And my answer to most of them is, if there's not one, why not start one? Every one of these other ones gets started by somebody else. You got to have the first couple brave souls. And honestly, not to divert from what Roger was saying, I'm going to have David Tamayo on next week to talk about, reaching out to the Hispanic American free thought, or Hispanic American community, to include them in the Hispanic American free thought community. But, I've worked with Mandisa and Black Nonbelievers and others to try to find ways to reach out to the Black churches too, or the people who think they're stuck in Black churches and want ways out. We have so much that unites us. I mean, yeah, we're not exactly the same. We didn't have the same upbringing, but we're sitting here talking about our experience in church, and there's so much mirroring the two of us, and now with Roger as well, the three of us, that it's incredibly frustrating for me to think that there are people out there who think they're alone and think they're the first ones who've had to deal with this, and that nobody else can help. So I'm at least grateful that you reached out and got some information and responses from Brady as well.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. I really appreciate everything you've done. I've been watching you and your different programs for 12 years now, and it's been amazing. It really has been a cathartic for me, in spite of me still clinging to the anger and all of that. I've been working with Recovering from Religion. They have a wonderful chat help. I self-isolate, so I don't get out in the community much. And some of the therapy groups I've been to, the people, like one group, I said, I suffer from religious trauma syndrome. And one of the members said, he just scoffed and he said, oh, there's no such thing. Right. And so I felt rejected even by therapy groups. I know it's my own reaction, but
well,
anyway, that was a horrible reaction from them.
Well, yeah. But anyway, I just wanted to say thank you very much, Mr. Dillahunty, and also you, Brady, everybody else that is involved with this show. It's wonderful. It's excellent to see reasonable human beings. That not everything is delusion. Yeah, and so, well, thank you. I appreciate you gentlemen having me on board.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for calling. It's a frustrating state of affairs, to be sure. But I'm really grateful that people are finding us and everything. Wow, we just had something weird happen where there were 4 callers and now I've got 1. But I think what it is a couple that were screened out and one that was screened in. So if any of you have questions for myself or Brady or just in general, we're always going to give priority to theist callers, but we have a couple atheist callers here with questions, and I'm really optimistic that there are people who are dealing with things and finding their way out and learning how to deal better with family and friends who don't necessarily believe or view things the same way that you do. I get asked all the time, how do you do this? How do you do this? I can tell you how I debate, and I can tell you how I think about those sorts of things. I can't make you think the same way that I do, but I can teach people how to do that. When it comes to how do you have a conversation with your mom about God, I'm probably not the guy to talk to, because my conversations with my mom haven't necessarily gone very well, to the point where we just don't have those conversations anymore.
Wow.
But we have Dex in the U.S. Pronouns are he, him, wants to talk a little bit about the harm that Christianity causes. So Dex, welcome to the Hang Up.
Hi. Thank you. First time calling. I didn't mean to call about this for years. When you and Viga were talking about deconversion, this is the first time in 15 years I've actually told the true story, my deconversion, because it's not great. It's probably would be too much for most people to handle. First off, they always hear God has a plan, right? But are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Just wanted to make sure. God has a plan, but we don't know the plan. So, if we have free will, how can we not? If we go play against the plan, we don't know, and then everything's part of it. Well, growing up, I was bullied, pushed around a lot, to the point where I was manic depressive by 3rd grade, suicidally so. But at one point, I just figured, after something that happened in high school, I came to the conclusion, what if God had a plan? What if he planned for me not to survive, to kill myself, and that was supposed to be a change, and I chose not to.
To try to thwart God?
No, just because I chose not to. And it was past tense. I realized that I should have done it years ago. That would have been his plan, and I fucked it up by not doing it. I came to the conclusion maybe that's the reason all the bad things happened, was because since I went against God's plan, and well, according to the Bible, he's not a very nice fellow when you go against him. That's the reason why things were going so bad.
Yeah.
So I wish I could say that I deconverted because of logic and reason, like I have now, luckily. But it was simply because if I didn't, it was gonna drive me mad, and I doubt I'd be here still if I was still a Christian. But I don't know if there is a.
I appreciate what you're saying, Dex, and I want to make sure I'm understanding that what you seem to be describing is that during the period of time where you were a Christian, you were distraught and suicidal, and in trying to find how God's plan seemed to conflict with how you viewed the world. And now that you've found your way out, is your life better? Are you no longer struggling with those sorts of thoughts?
Not as bad as I used to. I've learned how to deal with everything, and I'm coping with everything usually pretty well. I've never come close to actually doing anything or really truly having any thoughts. I still have problems with depression, but
sure,
I'm working on that.
It's one of the things that I think that Christianity and other religions. I mean, I'm fine with bashing Christianity. I'll bash it all day long. But I mean, I want to bash, in reality, bad ideas. And there are a number of religious traditions that are absolutely god awful on mental health issues. And if we have this long history of, there aren't mental health issues, that's demonic possession, that's, spiritual warfare, that's all of these things. And now I'm at least optimistic that a good chunk of Christian society and religious society is starting to recognize that the brain is a real thing, and that there are chemical imbalances, there are a number of different conditions, and that just because someone is suffering from depression or is autistic or whatever the issue may be that they're struggling with, that doesn't mean that there's demonic possession. The one frustrating point is that even most of those still think that prayer is the best course of action, when we know that's not the case. We know that prayer doesn't do anything, at any rate, beyond chance. You can flip a coin and you've got just as much as success of, heads, I've cured my depression, tails, I have not. And so thanks so much, Dex, for reminding us that there are people in this world. And I would say that while I was a believer, I didn't see a single negative thing about Christianity. Not at all. My life was better. My life was happier. I had the promise of eternal salvation. I was loved. I wasn't perfect, but I was forgiven. There was someone who was on my side. All of these things. It was all about the positive. And now, like the caller who we won't mention again, talks about how much I hate religion. I hate religion for what it does to people. I hate Christianity for what it does to people. I don't hate the people.
Yeah. It's what they were been taught. Most of these people, had they not been taught that, probably would have been good people. But they hold bad beliefs.
And that's why we need more people speaking out. Thanks so much for calling in, Dex, to remind us of that. And I hope that you continue to see improvement and a better life. And if you need assistance at any point, remember, it's always a good reminder for me to push the psychotherapy project so that you can get sound advice from a therapist that's not going to point you at religion or talk about how this is a failing of your soul. But thanks, Dex.
Thank you for taking my call. I appreciate it.
Very much. We'll talk to you later.
I think that's so interesting that you could have, like you said, different Christians. One person can hear God's got a plan for your life and it inspires them. The person right next to them can hear God's got a plan for your life and it can depress them because, like he said, what if I don't? What if I didn't live according to that plan? And then you start thinking about the dominoes. And I don't know if we often think about just how impactful some of our language can be and the concepts that we're putting over young people's minds. That's very interesting.
On that note, hey, look, there's a cat in my room, despite the fact that I've closed the door. It's decided to come over here and rub on my legs. It really needs to be let out. And while I'm waiting for a response to that wonderful coded message, Vincent in New York, welcome to the Hang Up on the Line. How are you?
Hey, not bad at all. How you guys doing?
We're all right.
Good,
I'm all right. What do you got for us? It says here that you want to explain why you believe in God in the Bible, and that's the whole reason I do most of these shows. So welcome and thank you for agreeing to step up.
Well, I've been watching your show a long time. Well, all your shows. I mean, even since back in the Atheist Experience days, and I just always had fun watching and some interesting conversations. I think the first time I saw you, you were talking to a Mormon guy about the movie The Rock. You guys were getting a good laugh out of it. And like at the end of the call, he was like, The Rock is really a good movie. So I kind of always been entertained by you guys. But I remember that first video pretty well.
Well, that's one of us. But yeah. So I appreciate the fact that it resonated with you. I don't remember that call, but there's been a lot of calls. So help us out here. Brady's here with me. let us know, and please, we know there's going to be interruptions and stuff, but just kind of give us an overview of what you believe in and why.
Okay. Well, I'm Christian, and the reason I believe that is because of personal experiences, miracles that have happened in my life that I've seen, that I've witnessed, supernatural things. And just the logical, context of the Bible, the things that the Bible instructs. I mean, I don't think anybody could argue that if you live that way that the Bible instructs, you will have a better life. You're going to have a more peaceful life. People that are led by lust, it's a burning desire, right? And it never ends. I mean, people want more and more and more. Greed, they want more and more and more. But when you got Christ, money's not a factor. You're not pulled down by the stuff in this world. You're not weighed down by any of it. It's, I can tell people to keep the change now because God's got my back. I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about grabbing every little dollar. I'm not looking at every woman that walks by me with lust. I see people for human beings, for, who they are and the souls that they are. The blinders are off. And it's a very beautiful thing. I've experienced a lot in my lifetime. And every time I veer from God, my life goes awry. Every time. I could tell you things in the Bible. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to see what Brady's got to say on this, because it's not always we get theists that are calling and defend stuff. I'm going to have a ton of questions in a minute, but I know I can see Brady getting ready to say, but wait.
Well, yeah,
right.
I'm hearing you. I guess you said several things that pique interest when you talk about miracles that you've experienced. I'm sure you've had to maybe defend this in the past. What do you do when someone else has similar miracles from a different God? How do you deal with that?
Well, they're fallen angels. That's really what most of the other religions are led by, fallen angels, and there is power there. There was a former Mormon that
the miracles.
No, I mean, granted, there is mental illness. There are people with mental illness too, which is, I mean, both can be true, right? There's people that experience genuine miracles from demonic entities that pretend to be a holy entity.
I'm not aware of any demonstration that miracles are possible or that miracles have occurred. So when we ask what you believe and why, you just said you're a Christian and then why. You do realize there's a bunch of different versions of Christianity. So at some point we may have to dig in on what your particular version is. But when you say you've witnessed miracles, granted, I disagree with almost everything you said. I disagree with your assessment on lust and the simplistic view of it and all of those things. And my life is definitely better now that I'm no longer a Christian. I could tell people to keep the change before or after. But in particular, you seem to be convinced by witnessing miracles. I wonder if you could give us an example of a miracle you witnessed and how you concluded that it was supernaturally caused.
Well, about 20 years ago, I would ride the bus to school, and I would get up early to get on the bus. And my mother never got up. I mean, she worked nights, so she never got up in the morning. She woke me up about an hour before school in tears. She said she had a dream about my sister dying, and that there was a hearse that was taking her. She was in PA when she died. And of course, we lived in New York our whole lives. And she had the dream that the hearse was taking her from one state to another. And as she's telling me the dream, it's something I'll never forget as long as I live. I just can't believe it to this day, how astonishing it is. As she was explaining the dream to me, she said, and then the phone rang in the dream. And right as she said that, the phone rang right in front of me. She picked up the phone and she got the news that my sister was dead, that she had died. And I mean, how do you explain that?
I don't believe you.
And that is, I mean, I don't have a camera, I don't have nothing that I can show you, but yeah, it is true. And I've told other atheists, and they said that there's psychological links that a mother has with children and like instinctual stuff through evolution, which
What I'm saying is, so how old were you?
I was 17.
Okay. And so at 17, your mom, who never gets up, comes in to wake you up on one day, just crying about how she's had a nightmare about your sister dying. And for some reason, it's relevant to point out there was a hearse taking her from PA to New York. And then right when your mother says that a phone rang in the dream, that's when the phone actually rings to tell your mom that your sister died.
Yeah.
Sorry, what? Okay.
Yeah.
Who was calling?
It was the hospital where she was at.
Why was your sister in the hospital?
She was born with a lot of problems. She was born with problems. They gave her shots, and they gave her a vaccine that was they gave it to her twice, basically, is what happened. They gave her a double vaccine. So it wasn't the vaccine itself, but it was the fact that they gave her two vaccines. And she ended up having a fever. She was a baby. It basically fried her brain. It made her, and she was supposed to pass away at that point. But my dad goes through
how old was this? How old was your sister when she died?
She was born in 78, and that happened in 2000. So
wait, your sister was born in 1978, and she got vaccines in 2000 that did something to her brain?
She got vaccines in as an infant.
Okay.
And then that happened.
Did she spend the rest of her life in hospitals?
On a ventilator. Yeah. And my dad had to make the decision, basically, like let her die or put her on a ventilator the rest of her life.
So what you're saying is that your sister was on a ventilator for 22 years?
Yes.
And you think it's a miracle from God that he decided to torment your mom with a nightmare about a phone call and then have an actual phone call come in to tell you that your sister, who everyone should not have been surprised to learn died. And you think this is a miracle from God. Why would a God torment your mom with a nightmare and give you this memory and kill your sister? What kind of God do you worship?
Well, for one thing, it was doctors' misconduct that caused my sister to have that problem, and she should have never been put on a ventilator.
Vincent, did God know what was going to happen to your sister before it happened?
Apparently, I mean,
did God know what was going to happen to your sister before he created the universe?
Well, that's where we're all victims of circumstance and chance.
That's not the question I asked. Did God know what was going to happen to your sister before he created the universe?
I don't know.
Could God have created a universe? Could God have created a universe where that didn't happen to your sister?
I mean, it's not the thing you've got to understand is this life is not meant to be permanent. It's not.
Okay, so I asked you a very specific question about what God could or couldn't do, and your response is to tell me that this life is not meant to be perfect, something that you don't know, can't prove, and is completely fucking irrelevant to what I just said, right?
Permanent. No, permanent.
It doesn't matter. You don't know. You said life was not meant to be permanent. You don't know that. You have no way to demonstrate it, and it's not relevant to what I just said, correct?
Well, doesn't nature show you that? I mean, it's kind of obvious.
I'm not going to continue. No, shut up. I'm going to mute you, and I'm going to unmute you in a second. You're right now in a frantic mode of defense because I've asked you the questions that if you consider them honestly, will expose the problems in your miracle claim and expose the problems in your reasoning. And so instead of answering them honestly, you are now floundering around like a fish out of water, trying to find anything that you can say to deflect from the problem at hand. Let's get back to your miracle. Your view is that the God who created the universe, who may well have known what was going to happen to your sister and did nothing to prevent it, then decided after 20 some odd years of your sister being on a ventilator to torment your mom with a dream of her daughter dying, something that she'd been tormented with probably for 20 some odd years. And that on this particular day, a miracle occurred, and that miracle is a phone ringing while your mom is talking about a phone ringing. What kind of absolute prick of a God are you worshiping?
Hello?
Yes, that was a question.
Oh, you cut out a little bit there at the end.
Okay.
What kind of prick of a God are you worshiping was the question. A God who would, I'm still interested in, how do you know it was a God in the first place? How do you know Satan is not the one who gave your mother the dream? Like, why is it a miracle from God? You didn't attach God to your miracle in your storytelling, but Matt asked a bunch of other good questions that I'm curious to hear your response to.
Well, you guys are zeroing in on a God the whole time, and I understand that because I believe in God, right? I get that. But the thing that you got to understand is a man created a ventilator, right? God didn't hook up the ventilator and put her on a ventilator. That was man decided.
Vincent, stop. What difference does it make whether God created a ventilator or man created a ventilator? The issue here is that you believe in the Christian God, and your reason is because of a miracle that you witnessed. Please explain how a God giving your mom a nightmare and making the phone ring and making sure that the phone rang, telling her that your sister was dead, is a miracle. How is that a miracle?
I mean, it certainly explains the supernatural. It's a super. Okay, okay.
Now I'm muting you again. I asked you to explain how it's a miracle, and your response is it certainly explains the supernatural. No, sir, it does not explain the supernatural. It does not demonstrate that the supernatural exists. You haven't demonstrated that anything supernatural exists, or that anything supernatural occurred, or that any miracle occurred. I'm specifically asking you how you concluded that this is in fact a miracle. That's the question, because you're using it as proof of Christianity.
I think
so. How did you conclude that this dream/phone call counts as a miracle from God?
Okay, I'll concede some ground. Okay, maybe miracle was not a good word to use. Okay, because I get what you're saying.
Okay. I'm going to mute you again. I appreciate that concession. But before you continue, because I get the feeling you're getting ready to say something that's going to be even worse, let's go back to the beginning, because we asked you what you believed and why. And you said that you're a Christian and that one of the reasons was that you've witnessed miracles. When I asked you for a miracle, this is the example that you gave. To then backtrack and say, well, maybe it was overreaching. Yes, maybe it was. Now, do you have a miracle that is better than that one?
How about the fact that I was led by everything in this world until I got born again? I was led by lust. And it all went away. I was on drugs.
Vincent,
and
none of that is a miracle.
Okay, so explain it to me then. How does that happen?
Explain what to you?
How would that happen?
Explain. Okay, I will explain it to you. There are many people who live lives that then become convinced by religion that they should stop behaving in certain ways, and then they change their life. No miracle involved. Happens all the time. There are people in prison who seem to find Jesus, turn their life around, and then get out. That happens all the time. And it doesn't just happen to Christians. It happens to Muslims. It happens to Scientologists. Because when you're flailing around desperately and your life is falling apart, if you find the religious message that resonates with you, It is not about the truth of the message that changes your life. The only thing that matters is whether or not you believe that you should change your life. It's you that changed your life. There's your explanation. Where's the miracle?
Okay. What about my grandmother who got healed from diabetes?
No.
She was taking that.
Vincent,
Okay.
listen to me.
I could go. I mean, I got a ton of miracles.
No, you can't go on. I'm fucking muting you. Listen to me. I took your first miracle and we knocked it down and you admitted it wasn't a miracle. Then your second miracle, I knocked it down. It's not a miracle. I'm going to give you one more chance because you say that you're a Christian because you have witnessed miracles. Give me a miracle that is better than the two non-miracles you just tried to do, or admit that you don't believe because of miracles. Which one is it?
So you're not going to even concede to the fact that could be supernatural. Like the fact that my mom had a dream that night. Never. Don't
fucking tell me to wait. I would like to get Brady to address you, but now you're just being a dick. I listened to what you said and I gave you an explanation. I know that you are desperately flailing around here. When I unmute you, I want you to say, the strongest miracle that I have witnessed is, and then tell me what that miracle is. And if you don't do that, I will hang up on you, despite the fact that I'd love to have Brady address this. So begin with the strongest miracle that I have witnessed is, and then tell us.
You won't even. Oh boy. Okay, I told you about my grandmother.
Nope. You failed. You failed, Vincent. I just hung up on you. When I say the next words out of your mouth need to be the strongest miracle I've witnessed is, those need to be the next words out of your mouth. If not, you are being disrespectful to myself, my co-hosts, all the viewers. I can't take you seriously.
Yeah. It makes me think back on the low bar that I had for claims of the supernatural, what I was willing to accept. And that's one of the reasons why I look back and I'm ashamed of myself, because I'm like, man, I would have called X a miracle in my days of past. I would have called our epistemological bar needs to be raised. And that's one of the things that I'm so interested in challenging the believers in my life to still think about. Is that really proof of what you're saying it's proof of? Vincent, that might be something you might want to just take a look at.
Yeah, it's really frustrating when somebody is like, oh, I've witnessed so many miracles. My grandmother was cured of diabetes. Okay, show me a diagnosis of diabetes and a prognosis, and then show me a clear screening afterwards. But also, then you have to say, why did this happen? We know that people spontaneously go into remission from cancer and stuff. Now, I'm diabetic. I don't expect to be miraculously cured in any sense by God or anybody else. But if the if the claim is my grandmother was cured of diabetes, all right, that's awesome. I'm genuinely glad that your grandma was cured of diabetes. So let's ask some questions about that. Number one is, how do you know that a God cured your grandmother of diabetes? And the answer most oftentimes is, well, what else could it be? I don't know, but I'm not the one that's asserting that I do know. Right. You're the one that's claiming that you know and that you know it's God. And so I'd like to know how you know that. It is an absolute failure by most people to understand how to draw a link between possible or proposed explanations for something to and the event to show which one's actually right. I really wish I was optimistic that maybe we were going to get a theistic caller, but
Vincent.
So, Rob in Virginia, an atheist calling in. Pronouns are he, him. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Can you hear me? Do I sound okay?
You good?
I hear you. You sound pretty normal. Yeah. We'll see.
Cool. I hope I'm normal. Should I start off with my question, or do you already know on there?
Well, it says here, you want to know, can you still be an atheist, or can you be an atheist and still worship a God? And so the question is, I'll ask you, Rob, can you worship something and not believe that it's real?
That's what I've been giving a little bit of thought about. I think so. I think you can.
Okay. Then if you think so, then I'd say yes, you can be an atheist and still worship a god, because I think that you can worship, like somebody could worship Voldemort knowing that he was a fictional creation and say, this is the archetype that I want to model and focus my attention on and direct my reverence towards. And so if atheism is just about what you believe, I don't know, Brady, do you think that's all right? You think you can?
It's almost like, well, my question would be why? Why would you worship something that you don't believe in?
I'm glad you asked that.
So
I was going with the literal question.
Yeah, so I guess like the question kind of stems from the fact that like I'm a huge fan of Greek mythology. I really love Athena, and to me I see Athena as kind of like an idealized version of myself, and the things that she kind of represents, wisdom and all these sort of things, and her more benevolent stories where she isn't a jerk, are like the parts where I feel like I can kind of like put myself in a mold of what she kind of stands for and kind of everything that she represents. And I don't believe that she's real, and I don't believe that she'll answer any of my prayers. But it's more of the fact that I enjoy everything about what she is and who she can be.
I think there's a difference between idolizing and idol worship. Like you can idolize something without worshiping that thing, I think.
Yeah. I think if you go with a strict definition of worship, where it's just reverence towards something, I think you could worship an idea. I think you could, I don't know why you would. I like, for example, there are plenty of fictional gods that I have, I don't know, fond thoughts of or admiration for. I'm not just talking about like hedonistic things like Bacchus or Loki or, things like that. But it's my respect for those ideas is more about looking at the interesting propositions that humans have come up with to explain the things that they don't know, or to try to codify, to try to bring their ideas into some sort of package that is easily presented to somebody. An archetype. Here's the hero. Our views of heroic events tied up in, I'm going to go see Guardians of the Galaxy 3 tomorrow night at a premiere. And I will admit the MCU has been in decline for the last year or so. But I can easily see taking those fictional creatures and entities and saying, this is the one I identify with. This is the one I want to be like, or this is the one I think is already like me. I don't know how that equates to worship and anything beyond a reverence for the abstract, like Brady was saying. But yes, if your answer is simply, can I be reverent towards and identify with and look up to and idolize an entity that I don't believe exists? Sure. But I like his other question, which was why.
Can I add this to that?
Please.
I think in hearing what Matt just said, it could be argued that that's what Christians in particular, maybe other religions, have done with their God. They've taken these concepts that we idolize, fatherhood, care, provision, protection, justice, love. We idolize these concepts and we extol them, and then you attribute them to, I think the problem becomes not with idolizing, but when you go further to personify and say, I don't just idolize these ideas, you create a person and then you pin those ideas to that person. That might be, to me, I think, where the problem would lie, if there's a problem at all there.
Okay, that makes total sense. No, yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense to me. I'll have to go back and watch this because that was a lot to take in. My vocabulary isn't like super good. I'm like in the middle of reading like the God Delusion and stuff like that, and I barely can understand a word that he's saying in that entire book. So forgive me if I have to like process that a little bit.
All good.
But yeah, no, that makes total sense. It's definitely the ideas. It's definitely like the ideas that I idealize more than the actual deity itself. Okay, Kitty. Okay. I'll let you out.
That was the cat this whole time?
That was not me. Sorry. But yeah, no, it's definitely like the ideas that I idolize, and I'm just not easily able to, describe it. And I think just giving like a character or a symbol,
an icon. It's an icon.
Yeah, it's an icon because I have like some tattoos that are associated with Athena, like the owl and the snake and the olive tree, and I think those are really cool, and I really appreciate them, and they give me a sense of like how I kind of like look at the world around me, how I look at things in a really objective manner, and how I value like empiricism and evidence and all this sort of deal.
I want to steal from my Christian past, because I think there's something to being able to do what the Christians have done, which is they say in the church, right? We were supposed to be Jesus's hands and feet. We're the way that he reaches out and touches the world and heals and hugs and helps. Those things that you idolize about Athena, rather than just put them on your body, which is cool, if those things are things that are beneficial to humans, you could worship, if you want to use the word Athena, by making those things a reality in your world. The same way that when I was a Christian, I was supposed to be bringing the peace of Christ, or bringing the kindness of Christ, or the love of Christ, like putting those things actually out into the world, as opposed to praising them for being up in some metaphysical realm. Maybe that might be an acceptable form of worship.
Okay. And like, so what you're saying is like actually like the ideas that I get from them, and actually like putting them out in like a positive fashion, or in a positive manner.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and that has been for me. It's the reason like I read a little bit more, and like, and why I like take the atheist stance, because it makes sense. It feels it makes sense. It's logical, and I try not to like make opinions without forming like no. I think I understand. Like I said, I'll have to like rewatch this to like really get it, because a little bit is going over my head at the moment.
This would be really disappointing, Rob. And don't get me wrong, I appreciate the question and the fact that there was a conversation about it and everything else. Does it make a difference at all whether or not you are an atheist, and whether or not you worship or admire a God that you don't believe in? What difference does it make what labels you put on or anything else? The fact of the matter seems to be, whether you call it worship or not, you have a reverence and admiration for Athena. And whether you call yourself an atheist or not, whether or not you have that reference, you don't believe that she's real. So I don't know. It almost feels like you're trying to give yourself permission to be what you already are, which is someone who connects with a fictional being, knowing that it's fictional. And if all you're looking for is a blessing, well, cool. I hereby give you permission to,
Thanks. I really did need your permission. Thank you.
Appreciate it. I gotta let you go, Rob, but thanks so much for calling.
Thank you. Thank you so much. People are giving me rad reading advice too in the chat. Thank you.
Awesome. Appreciate it. And we're going to take one more call here from Andrew in just a moment. Before, I'm going to mute you for a second, Andrew, but we'll definitely take your call. I want to make the actual announcements for this week. First of all, thanks again for being willing to be on here. I've enjoyed this, and we got to get you back. And I don't know, I love talking with you. Maybe we'll get to do that a bunch more. But the Transatlantic Call-In Show is live tomorrow with Aron and Katy, the OG TACIS folks. Then the Sunday show is going to be me and Jimmy at 3 p.m. on Sunday. And Skeptalk, we don't know who the guest is, but it will be happening Monday at 6. HOSTility Tuesday is Jimmy and Seth Andrews at 6 p.m. And then next Wednesday, right back here on the Hang Up, David Tamayo, who was supposed to be on last week, but we had technical issues due to storms, will be back on at 7 p.m. To do that. And I also want to make sure that we thank Dragon for screening and all of our moderators for doing a wonderful job in there, even when people are trying to tell me how to do the show and they just think it's constructive criticism when they're flat wrong. After this call, we're going to go through and read all the super chats over $10. And it doesn't look, we don't have a ton of them, but I would imagine some of them are going to be coming in shortly. But it doesn't matter how many come in. I like them no matter what. And so this caller, Andrew in Florida, actually wants to question you about your old lyrics. And I thought this would be an entertaining topic to end the show on. So Andrew, welcome to the Hang Up. You're on with Brady.
Hello, gentlemen. Can I call you fanatic for old time's sake?
You sure can. It's more like fanatic now,
right.
But sure.
I love that.
Oh, cool. Oh, man. No, just when I heard the news, I was like, what? I grew up on your music, on the cross movement. You had more influence over my own faith and theology than my own pastor.
Wow.
Yeah, it was easier to listen to your music than sermons. And just the lyrics are so deep. So, former Reverend fanatic. In one of your songs, you were like, trust me, son, you haven't lived until you've lived with the mindset that heaven gives.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you flip that on its head now? Because with the heavenly mindset, no pain, no suffering. You know what song I'm talking about?
I know. Trust me, son, you haven't lived. That song is Think on These Things.
Yeah, that's the one.
Mm-hmm.
But heavenly mindset, that's real life. No death, no pain, no, just it's a euphoria. How do you flip it on its head now?
So, but you just said two things that to me contradict. You said it's real life, and then you talked about this euphoria. Where really we were not talking about real life. We were talking about a world that we would want to go to, a world where there was no suffering, no death. We had a song called "Cry No More," saying one day these things won't be this way. We were counting on a God to come back and fix it all and rebuild it all and all that. But that is not real life. You look at Jesus telling the people that were following him, hey, some of y'all are not going to die until you see me return in the clouds with angels and the kingdom comes, and they've all died. That's not real life. And so the things I was saying in that song, those were hopes. Those were religious hopes. Those were hopes from ancient writers who believed things that just were not true. And so I don't think I'm turning it on its head. I think I was kind of upside down when I said that, and I got off of my head, and now I'm standing on my own too, thinking my own thoughts and living my own life, and not hearing from ancient men and letting ancient men speak to me in a God tone. So that's how I process that.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. We're still alive, but there's a lot of suffering here. But just giving up that hope, it's a tough one. It's a tough one. Mind if I talk about another part of that song?
Matt, we got time?
Yeah, go for it. I'm loving it because I just found out because I was already out by the time you guys were starting to be popular. Do you have 2 Grammy nominations for 2 of those albums?
Yeah.
So Higher Definition got a Grammy nomination and History got a Grammy nomination. That's outstanding. But yes, ask another question, Andrew, because I'm digging it.
Oh yeah, I still dig his music. I'm still a Christian, but oh man, No, so another part of that song, he was like, he's coming again soon to bring doom. So your crew should hide. If not, then you should side with the God who got it going on.
Catch a man's attention like cars
like-
blowing horns in traffic. Yep.
That's right. That's right. And so, like, you're living, so all these years you're living with, like, the fear of judgment. And, like, there's an all-powerful supernatural God literally watching everything you do. How do you, like, get away from that now, like, saying he doesn't even exist? Like, he was so real to you. And his judgment was so real. But now, it's, like, the exact opposite. Like, he's not real at all. Like, how do you go from one end of the spectrum to the other? That's crazy.
Yeah. So all I could say, one, I wrote a whole book about it, detailing why I disbelieve what I used to so ardently believe. But bro, the question comes down to this. I was going to post about this today, but I stopped myself. When my mother was married to my father, right? I remember as a kid, she used to tell us, I don't know why she told us this, but she said, I told your father before we got married, if he ever hits me, I'm leaving. And then she would always say, and he's never hit me. Now, they ended up breaking up for other reasons, but I always remembered that. I told your father, if he ever hits me, I'm leaving. Well, in a similar way, I don't know if I ever said it, but I think I had a pact with God in my heart. I only ask one thing. Don't lie to me. If you've lied to me, then you're not who you said you were. God is not a man that he should lie. So if I find lies or things that just cannot be true in what I was calling God's communication, then either God can lie, so why should I trust him? Or God is not the author of this, so why should I trust the authors? And so everything that you're saying, I understand what you're questioning. Like, how could I go from fearing God to now thinking God doesn't exist? God had one job. Don't lie to me. And we crossed that bridge, and I can't go back. So if you want to know what I mean, that's why the book is called Let There Be Gaslight. You'll see what I mean when I say that.
Yeah, I have your book for sure. I have doubts as well, but I just don't know if I can jump as far as you. Thank you, brother. Thank you, guys.
Yep.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Andrew. Appreciate it. I tell you, we're getting ready to move on to super chats here in just a minute. If you could, before we do that, so that I don't forget later, let everybody know where to find you, how they can. Are you working on new music that isn't praise stuff?
I've got a few people in my ear right now trying to send me music to make some new music. I don't know if I ever will. This is sad, y'all, but I only got good at rap because I was so infatuated and in love with the gospel message, and I wanted to tell it often and tell it well. And so in my mind, it's hard to disassociate rapping, at least writing it, from my life as a Christian.
Sure. I
don't know if I'll get there. So, but in the meantime, me and some other friends who have deconverted, we have a podcast called Ichapod, ICHAPOD. You can find that on YouTube. If you get friended or accepted, you can find me on Facebook, Causing Trouble, under the name Brady Fanatic Goodwin. Most of my former Christian friends, or Christian friends, but former Christian, since I'm a former Christian, they're still Christians. We often have dialogue on Facebook where I'm just, hey, let's think about this. And we go back and forth there. In the book, Let There Be Gaslight. Outside of that, you probably won't see me. So,
well, on that note, we're going to move on to some super chats. As a quick reminder, any super chat over $10, we're going to read here, and I would make a change for that today because we're light there, and I want to make sure we get to people with questions. But I don't want to make anything difficult for my producer because then she won't go to bed with me. But
yeah, no changes, please.
Yeah, we're not changing anything. I hear you, hon. Real quickly, before we actually start reading them, I really enjoyed this. Let's find a time to get you back on and ask questions, see if we can get some callers that are directed more to this. I know that there are some other rap artists that have either formerly been involved in religion and found ways to to make their music and their art about science, about reason.
Yeah.
I don't know whether or not that has any appeal for you, but I at least know who a couple of them are. So I could imagine a rap supergroup hitting up the American Atheist Convention to just go, hog wild on it.
Yeah. I think I may know who you're talking about, some of them there, but another part of it is I had an entire career doing that. And I had sort of morphed out of music into education about 10 years ago. And so not that I don't have the muscle memory, but I lived that dream. So there's really nothing in me that wants to do that at this point.
So chat's already mentioning Graydon and Tombstone, and I'm like, yep. Those are the guys. And there's a couple others too that I know as well. But let's start doing these. If you want, we tend to alternate, but I'll start with the first one here. 1999 from Greg Murkowski. Eve was framed, had to shelter in place today during the Atlanta shooting. Ugh. When's this BS going to end? Glad she's safe. Thanks for the show. The best thing about Wednesday. I adore Eve. I was so happy to get to hang out with her. Yes, I saw her post. I'm glad she's safe. And also, I want to, I'll remind everybody about the rest of that later. But yes, what are we going to do? There's people who, you talk about, can you be an atheist and worship, Athena, not thinking she's real? There's some people out there who worship the Second Amendment or their particular interpretation of the Second Amendment. There's people out there who worship guns. There's people out there who worship machismo and, stereotypical roles of what it means to be a man in society, etc. These are problems that aren't directly caused by religion, but these problems and religion are both exacerbated by a lack of skepticism, a lack of sound humanistic principles, a lack of this notion that God put us here to, we're stewards of this planet, but let's settle our conflicts with weapons, and because we can't reason. And if religion, it puts people in a position where they're incapable of resolving a disagreement through reason, then religion needs to go away. And even if it were true, if you have a true belief in a true, real God, and that still can't help you solve problems without resorting to violence, then your God is a miserable failure, and that religion needs to die, even if that God continues to live. Thanks, Greg. Oh, I have the list. I keep forgetting. I have a link where the list is all in my control, and I just sat here and stared at it. So this one's yours to read.
Oh, I just realized that I could actually see the chat. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, from Jay Spoken J. What a great discussion. Be Good is very well spoken and very insightful. It would be great to see him again. You're good too, Matt. Jimmy, no love for Jimmy.
No.
Thanks a lot,
Jimmy's not comfortable with compliments, and so he asked people just to say "go fuck yourself" instead.
Okay.
And so that's become the meme. It's basically, wow. Jimmy, we love you.
Okay.
999 from Shannon Mac. Friendly reminder to share Dargendorp, Mrs. PayPal information. I'm off to see Return of the Jedi, Fergal Burgle, Minergal Burgle, and may the 4th be with you tomorrow. Thanks, Shannon. I'm not going to do that. I'll go into it another time. I'm still working up details. On Sunday, I talked about Dargendorp, who was a moderator on my Twitch, but also he created and maintained the list of everything I've ever done. His partner is in an incredibly difficult position right now. I got the chance to speak to her today, and because they weren't legally married, there's a number of other issues that are coming up. We're going to be doing whatever we can to try to help her out, but I'm not yet ready to just go sharing fundraiser, PayPal stuff on today's show. We're waiting for some more information and the best way to go about doing it. But thanks so much, Shannon. Much appreciated. I did do some streaming today on Twitch and got to talk to the people who saw him most often. I can't think of anybody who I've never met in person and did not know what they looked like until today. Like I got pictures, personal pictures of Dargendorp today. And until then, it didn't matter to me what he looked like. He didn't match the pictures. The pictures didn't match up with what I had thought. And they were way better. And it's like, not to say that I had any negative view. It's just that it's, you build up something in your head about what this person may look like after years of interaction. I can't think of anybody that I'd never met in person who had done more for me personally and asked for nothing.
Wow.
Just, I want to contribute. I like what you're doing.
That's his legacy. That's his legacy.
I want in many ways to be more like him. And I'm glad to have known him. And I'm very, very sorry that he's gone, but all right. This one's yours.
From Jabari Deer. Be good. Are you ostracized from the Black community when you came out as atheist, and how do you deal with that? So 2 things, and Matt, I'm open to any pushback you'll have on this. I don't classify myself as an atheist. I classify myself as atheistic. As it pertains to gods that the revealed religions, I don't believe any of them are real. As to whether or not a God is what's at the base of our reality, I have no idea. I don't think that's the case, but I don't know. So atheistic is as far as I go right now. What do you think about that?
It's funny because with how you described what your take is, I wrote down something almost identical with regard to the caller that turned out to be a troll. Because in discussion about belief, so for all the gods that I've evaluated, I not only don't believe they're real, I actively believe they're not real. I can't necessarily prove it, but I can explain the how and why that I not only am not convinced of that they exist, but I'm convinced they don't exist. But what I wrote was, positive atheism is the proposition that God doesn't exist. And I am convinced of that for all the gods I've been presented with, but not for gods that I haven't evaluated. I don't have a no gods exist view. However, that's not what atheism is or requires. Until for some God that I haven't been presented with, I do not believe it because I haven't been presented with. It's impossible for me to believe something that I haven't been presented with. And so I'm an atheist. It doesn't require I'm convinced that God isn't real. It just requires I'm not convinced that God is real. And so for every God that could be out there that nobody's presented to me, I don't believe they exist. But that doesn't mean that I'm convinced they do exist. And since atheism and agnosticism address 2 different things, I like your portmanteau. It speaks to your desire and skill at playing with words. Let me put a couple words together so that it gets to more of what I'm expressing. I think philosophically it's a load of gobbledygook, but from a poetic standpoint, it was very clear what you meant right off the bat. And that's what language should be.
So the other part of the question was, I ostracized from the Black community when I came out. I was not ostracized from the Black community. I think I was ostracized, or at least I was villainized by my former Christian community, because I decided not just to come out as a non-believer, but to be vocal about it. Like the vocal Christian is a good Christian. The vocal unbeliever is a bad unbeliever. So I was supposed to stop believing and stay quiet. But because I was so vocal, that got me in trouble.
Yeah, people are all about freedom of speech until it's speech against what they like. And people are all about freedom of religion until it is somebody talking trash about their religion. And then all of a sudden those freedoms aren't as respected. I think one of my favorite things ever was a Christian guy who changed his mind about prayer in schools. and wrote an article about it because he was in Hawaii and was at some sort of sitting in the stands of the football stadium, and it was either like before a game or before some event at a school. And he noticed in the program for that event that they were going to have a prayer, and it warmed his heart because, they're gonna have a prayer at this thing. And then they came out and they did a non-Christian prayer, which shook him. And that's when he realized, oh, hang on a minute. If we allow even school-led or encouraged prayer like that, it's not necessarily going to be the prayer that I like. And so it's better for all of us. It protects all of our religious freedoms to stop trying to inject it into everything we do. And it's just like what's happening in the state of Texas right now, where they're trying to put the 10 Commandments up in every classroom. Well, that works, I guess, okay if you're Jewish or Christian, but what if you're Muslim? What if you're Hindu? What if you're Scientologist? What if you're an atheist? What if, you don't get to push and enforce those on everybody else. This thing has to be shot down.
Yeah.
$9.99 from Claire. Are there any actual ex-Catholic atheists? Yes, there are tons of them. Most I see are from crazier religions. Most arguments are against stuff I never believed to make me feel like I have no good reason to be an atheist. I tell you, Claire, I'd love to get into it with Catholics because from my perspective, growing up Southern Baptist, Catholics believed crazier shit than we ever could, like transubstantiation, that praying over a cracker turns it into the actual literal body of Jesus, that they should pray through Mary, which always seemed like idolatry to me growing up. But I know a ton of ex-Catholics. It's just that a lot of ex-Catholics, maybe this ties to what you're feeling, Claire. A lot of ex-Catholics may not seem to feel a connection with the broader secular community because we focus so much on what Protestants are trying to shove down the throats of everybody and legislate onto everybody. And so maybe it doesn't feel like we're rejecting the things that you grew up with. But I can tell you, I'm just as much, if not more, opposed to Catholicism as I am to Protestant versions of Christianity. The big difference for me is that Catholics are pretty good on evolution. They're terrible on condoms. They're terrible on reproductive rights in general. Yeah. And they're terrible on hiding child rapists and moving them around and shuffling them around so that they can avoid prosecution. But it's not just Catholics that do that. The Baptist Church and others have a problem with it as well. It's just the Catholics have truly mastered what it means to be repugnant on the grounds of child rapist. Although the Muslims are now going to beat them out at this, because I just witnessed a couple of debates at DebateCon 3, one of which was defending child marriage, which is child rape.
I saw that.
If you say that you can consummate sexually consummate a marriage to a 4-year-old that is going through precocious puberty, you are advocating for what is legally viewed as child rape and should be. And it just creeps me out to think that there's 50,000 people following this absolutely vile, repugnant coward who couldn't possibly handle an independent woman, and so has to advocate for basically owning a child as a bride.
Wow.
But, tell me how you really feel. So this is yours?
Oh, my screen didn't switch yet.
Oh, I'll do it. $5 from James Call. Matt, I love what you do. Brady, it's very nice to meet you. So
salute to you, James. Good to meet you, bro.
There's only a handful of these left. So I'll just read them off, and then the ones that address you can answer. So $10 from David DeBoe. Brady, how did you like Bear Grease, and does Red Cloud ever talk publicly about his religious journey or current beliefs?
So I just went to Albuquerque, New Mexico. My brother, I don't know if I ever met him in person before this past weekend, but when I was doing Christian rap, he was doing Christian rap. And he and his wife put together a Native American musical that is a twist on the classic Grease musical. And so
Nice.
there's a Native American product called Bear Grease. And so their musical is called Bear Grease. So I went out there to see their musical. David, Red Cloud and I did an interview on my podcast about maybe a month or two ago. I haven't released it yet. I may release it this week or next week. He's going to address his faith journey because people have been asking me, like, hey, you and Red Cloud got together. Did he deconvert too? Stay tuned for that that podcast episode. I think it'll be very interesting for people.
And Red Cloud, for those who don't know, is also Christian hip hop.
When I was doing Christian
producer?
hip hop, he was doing Christian hip hop.
Yeah.
He is no longer doing Christian hip hop, and people are wondering, is he still a Christian? And I'm not letting the cat out the bag just yet.
Yeah. Well, stay tuned and get a link. Well, what we do is, if you decide to release that, you know, we'll get you back and talk about how it went, what the reception was, and was it, you know, what did people think? Because
Yeah,
I had somebody come up to me the other day going, hey, is so-and-so still a Christian? Because I've seen, you know, weird stuff from them. And also 2 other people came up to me about different people saying, is so-and-so still a skeptic? Because I keep saying different things from them. And in one of the cases, I actually know what the answer is. And despite the fact that people are seeing differences in that person, the person I was talking to was in fact still a Christian, although in a slightly different respect. And the individual who they're like, is that person still a skeptic? I'm like, I don't know, but it sure don't seem like it.
That's how I was introduced to you, Matt. My friend Scott Vapperton, who's a friend of mine on Facebook, all through 2021, I had been posting like little cryptic messages that just was sort of trying to soften people up for the blow that I knew was coming in 2022. Yeah. And one of my friends sort of sniffed it out and said, he started sending me links to your show, because he's like, man, the questions Brady's asking, seems like he needs to talk to Matt. And so, yeah, people get those little
and you
hints.
made it without talking about me, and now we just get to hang out. So how cool is that?
Yeah.
$10 from... Oh, go ahead.
This is the wife of the person I was just talking about. I had no idea this was
way.
coming up.
Now, see,
Yeah. That's a
if I
miracle.
were still a believer, this would be answered prayer. That you just mentioned somebody. You didn't know which one was coming up next.
Right.
And it's like,
there's your miracle.
God works. Yes. This is more miraculous than anything our caller presented. But $10 from Lori Covington. Just want to tell Brady how happy we are to see him become his authentic self. It was so harsh for you at first, but Scott and I have your back. Open invitation for dinner next time you're in Virginia. That's sweet, Lori.
I'm making a road trip soon. So I'll let you guys know.
$20 from Diane Upshaw. Thanks, Matt and Brady. Great show. Glad to be here. Help and chat when I can. And it's much appreciated. We have one of the best communities here. And I kid you not, you can, Arden can chime in. Literally 20 minutes before we were getting ready to go live, I just said, man, I really don't feel like doing the show tonight. And that happens from time to time. But it's like, hey, there's no way. I mean, we had to cancel last week. There's no way I'm going to cancel. I got Brady sitting there waiting. You know, you just go out and you do a show and you put a good face on it. I freaking loved today's show. I'm glad that sometimes when my brain goes, gosh, I really don't want to do something, that's when I'm more inclined to actually do it. Just to see, okay, how can you do something when you're not really in the mood? And within 2 minutes of us talking, not only was I in the mood to have an awesome show, I'm thrilled that I didn't listen to my brain when it was like, you should really just go like do something else tonight. Because that's probably my brain being lazy more than anything.
Yeah. Good stuff.
20 allegedly real Canadian dollars from Kathleen Moncrief. Really great show tonight. I just finished reading Let There Be Gaslight, and everyone needs to read it. I plan to get my copy, Kathleen. I will probably take the generous donation from you and buy a copy for me and Aron to look at. And then when we get Brady down here for something, I get him to sign it. So I'll be good.
Good stuff.
$20 from Gnorp Florbson. What's the difference between faith and a hunch going with your gut? I'm concerned I use faith due to time constraints and intellectual education and limitations, then have to stick to my guns to avoid sunken costs. Do you have a preferred definition of faith?
I typically separate faith from trust. Faith is taking the word of someone about something that you cannot experience, but you hope to. Whereas trust is you're at least going on something that you have some way to verify. Something in the empirical rational realm allows you to say, to some degree, it's right for me to put stock in this, some past experience that forms your future presuppositions. In terms of faith versus a hunch, those hunches are probably based on past experiences. So to some degree, I don't know. It's hard for me to draw that line between like faith in the religious sense versus faith in things that you've seen before. You've started your car every day for the past year, thinking that it's going to start again tomorrow is, to me, not faith in the religious sense.
I think I agree with you. I've often said, so a lot of religious folks use the word faith, and they use it in a number of different ways, but the most common when you push back at all is they'll be like, well, you have faith too. And what they mean by that is that you have confidence in something, even though you don't have certainty and you may not know enough. Okay. And so faith to them is confidence in the absence of certainty. But that to me is trust and inference, which is how we live our life every day. Right. Today is pretty much the same as yesterday. And it is perfectly reasonable for me to train my gut to have intuitions and then modify every time there's new data, modify those intuitions, even if I don't ultimately discover that the original intuition was wrong. That to me is the difference. Faith isn't going to ever be corrected. It's the excuse people give when they believe something without a good reason. Because if you believe something and you have a good reason and somebody says why, you give that reason. And if you don't, then you say, well, I just take it on faith. And that I think what you're talking about, Gnorp, is I think that's the difference between faith and a hunch, because hunches are the result of training with the goal of being correct in mind. And faith is the result of being trained without necessarily caring whether or not you're correct and perhaps favoring comfort over accuracy.
Wow. That's a great delineation there. The willingness to be corrected in what you're hoping. Like like you said, if the data comes in and says, I should hope for something different, then you can do that. But with faith, you kind of painted yourself in that corner.
Yeah. You could also look at hunches in standpoint of like machine learning, where you have iterative learning, where I did this. And so I'm accumulating data about reality. Whereas faith, in the sense of I don't have a good reason, I'm going to say that I take it on faith that God is real. Instead of accumulating data, you're accumulating empty assertions or experiences in portraying law. Oh, this person and this person, everybody in the church felt the Holy Spirit moving. No, they didn't. Everybody in the church had some experience or reported some experience that they collectively attribute to the Holy Spirit, but there's no demonstration of any causal link. And we know I felt wonderful in church before. And if that were the case, why doesn't God light me on fire or strike me with lightning when I walk into a church now? Be like, get the hell out of here. What are you thinking?
And hunches,
$10 from Smart.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to add on that. Hunches, you typically, you go with them. Faith, you end up finding yourself going against what your hunches are. Faith kind of trains you to do the opposite of what the evidence suggests, which is probably the most problematic thing about it.
And to tie on to that, let's just keep one up on each other with this, because I'm loving this thing on faith. And one of the key things about faith is that when I operate based on a hunch, I'm doing it going, ooh, I'm not so sure about this, but I've got a hunch. And then what happens informs and changes that. Whereas if I operate based on faith, I have a cocksure confidence that I know that I know that I know that I know that Jesus Christ is risen and Lord. $10 from Smart Alec Atheist. My usual Wednesday stream that I watch was canceled this week, so I figured I'd show my appreciation here. I love your work, Matt. I like how you respond to callers. Be good and go fuck yourself, Jimmy. Thank you, Smart Alec Atheist. It's become a thing. It's got a mind of its own. $10 from Becca Albright. I'm an ex-Catholic. I'm very into educating communities on proper science and separation of church and state. Awesome, Becca. The hiding of child predators by the church opened my eyes to the horrors of faith. I think that's probably the only truly good thing we can say that came out of that, is that it woke people up. The Catholic Church is a criminal organization. That's undeniable. That doesn't also mean that there aren't good people involved in that who are interested in doing good things, but that the organization itself is absolutely criminal. So from, I believe, our call screener today, 22 euros from Dragon. Be good. Make sure to hit me up if that atheist rap supergroup ever gets started.
No doubt. Pray about it. That's how that'll happen.
So my final super chat today, I almost was tempted to skip, but I can't. I am beholden to this person, and I won't. There's so much that's gone on in the last week. I can't even pretend to be mean. $550 alleged dollars from Shannon Q, and she says, "I'm just here," spelled HEAR, because I'm Team Brady for life.
We're not even going to point out that this is a $5 super chat. The threshold for this show is $10, but make exceptions for Shannon Q here.
Shannon gets to do whatever the hell Shannon wants. And I kid you not, if Shannon messaged me and said, "Hey Matt, I think I should host the Hang Up next week," I'd be like, "Okay, I'll take the week off and Shannon can host the Hang Up." But
she's the queen.
Well done. All right. Thanks everybody for your super chats. Thank you, Shannon, for ending this off. Huge thank you to Brady for agreeing to do this. I'm absolutely pleased. We didn't know each other at all, and now I feel like we could do whatever. So if you're ever in the Austin area, definitely hit me up. If we head up in Pennsylvania area, I will let you know. I want to thank a number of people this week, not the least of which my guest, but also Jimmy, who came over and made some changes to audio that we needed to have happen before the show because of a software error. A huge thank you to my wonderful, lovely, sexy, talented producer who has my heart, and who I've just recently announced my will is to, for her and my brother to sort out my stuff. But also to Dargan for screening all of our moderators, for, doing what moderators do. And yes, including the people who called in with really bad ideas, and the people who called in just a little confused, and the people who really didn't want to defend stuff, and the people who gave their advice in chat and everything else. But I kid you not, I know we mentioned this on Sunday, and I mentioned him again. Andy, known as Dargendorp, as I mentioned earlier, did more for me than anybody I've never met in my life, and asked for nothing. Didn't seem to care about gratitude. Would probably be a little embarrassed that I'm saying this now. I love you. You are missed. I owe you more than you could have ever imagined. I wish I could tell you that, and I wish everybody here could appreciate you. But I genuinely hope that anyone who's out there who's working on activism issues can find yourself someone as selfless and giving as Andy was, to help you out in ways that you never even knew you needed. Stay tuned on the line for all the upcoming shows that I mentioned earlier tonight. TACIS tomorrow with Aron and Katy. The Sunday show with me and Jimmy. Skeptalk on Monday. HOSTility with Jimmy and Seth Andrews next Tuesday. And then myself and David Tamayo will be redoing the show that was supposed to happen next week at 7. Thank you, everybody. You guys have made my Wednesday once again just awesome. And I don't know, tell somebody that's done something nice for you that didn't ask for anything in return. Tell them how important that was, and make a will. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.